Hello, welcome to Trenching and Shoring. Please bear with me. I've never done this before. I can't pause this video and then restart it, so I have to go through all in one go. So please bear in mind that I'll probably be making some mistakes. Welcome to Trenching and Shoring. This is also known as competent person training. It's important training, especially if you're a supervisor and you have an excavation or a trench. You're required to do certain things. And if it went south in that excavation or trench, you would be the first person that they would come to talk to. So we're going to discuss the ways that you can shield yourself from possible litigation and be in the right and do the right thing. And that's what this trenching and shoring class is all about. So the regulations under trenching and shoring and excavations are primarily in the construction industry regulations, which are 1926 regulations. You guys straddle the 1910 general industry regulations, where the bulk of your regulations are, 1910.269. Those are the regs for general industry, and then the construction regs. So whenever you're maintaining, constructing, modifying, altering something, you're in the construction regs. So, you guys fall into the construction regs a lot. So that's why we have the trenching and shoring standard, the excavation standard, and the competent person standard, because you guys are in it. The best thing to do would be to stay out of it at all times. You won't have a trench if it's not over 4 feet. You won't have a trench if you're just putting cable into it and not entering it. There's a lot of ways you can avoid this regulation altogether. By definition, an excavation is any man-made cut, cavity, trench, or depression in the Earth's surface formed by earth removal, and that could be anything from a teaspoonful to a bucket load. It doesn't matter in OSHA's eyes. The teaspoon load of dirt removed from the surface of the earth is equal to the bucket of dirt removed from the surface of the earth. All trenches are excavations. All excavations are not trenches. Excavations tend to be wider than they are deep, and trenches tend to be deeper than they are wide. That's just basically the rule of thumb. Here we see a really good trench. It's a sanitary sewer. We see the sewer line running, and you see it. They have it benched out. They have it benched out so no material is going to cave in on the person. The exposure is minimized. And then they have the stockpile of dirt 2 feet from the edge of the excavation, so none of this material is going to fall in the excavation. This is just an example of a very good quality OSHA legal trench. There's the rule of thumb. Trench is narrow than it is wide. An excavation is wider than it is deep. So before you get started, you want to plan the work the plan. You want to locate all underground utilities, mark the path of the excavation. This is what gets into a competent person. Every day before work, a competent person must inspect the excavation or trench. And whenever there's a rainstorm or significant event that impacts the safety of that trench or excavation. So this is where it puts our supervisors and foremen in the crosshairs, or whoever's in charge of that site. So the best thing I would say is avoid it, but if you can't, then we need to get some inspection sheets if you should have a trench that needs to be left open. But we should always close our trenches as soon as we open them, only open them as need be, and not leave trenches unsecured. And then if we're going to go in a trench and it's over 4 feet, and this is what I'm talking about, over 4 feet. If we go in a trench that's over 4 feet, we have to do something in means of protecting people, unless it's basically solid rock, hard pan clay, that kind of soil. So who or what is a competent person? The answer is a competent person has knowledge, classes, and experience on the job training of excavations. The competent person is a supervisor. The competent person has stop work authority. The competent person must do daily inspections, and those inspections must be documented. Everybody on the crew has stop work authority. So we all know this and we live by it. So not only the competent person, but anybody on that job has stop work authority. The competent person must do daily inspections, and it must be documented. That's why if something went south, the first person that OSHA would come to is a competent person. So don't put a crosshair on your back. We'll get some inspection sheets. It's pretty straightforward and simple what we must do. And if more training is required, I'm sure we can get Frank to send you to a soils class in Denver or a trenching class. Competent person. They need to inspect for possible cave-in situations, indications of protective system failures, and hazardous conditions. That is what, in addition to daily inspections, the competent person must inspect for. Start of each ship following rainstorms, cave-ins, water accumulation, or hazardous atmospheres. Also may need to use a forecast meter. Competent person must also understand soil mechanics and recognize the hazard they create. So a lot of people just call all soils like sandy soils, and then there's no question of protection or how far you spread that trench out or what you do, and then there's no question you treat all soils as such. A lot of people want to treat all soils that it's like hard pan clay or solid dirt, and I'll just get in there and do my job real quick, and then that's when everything falls apart. But competent person must understand soil mechanics. This is a trench rescue, and it's usually a body recovery. The competent person has stop work authority. You want to evaluate the site conditions prior to going on site and performing trenching operations or excavations. You want to watch out for surface encumbrances. There's a big rock lens. Those guys are working under it. There's no bracing whatsoever. It's a little bit difficult. Existing utilities. We know we got to call 811 prior to doing any work, excavation type of any kind. That's how they're going to mark them. Water accumulation. We're lucky. We live in a dry, arid climate. It's depth to water table, unless you're by the river or something. If we lived in like Louisiana or Florida, we'd dig down about 1.5 feet, 2 foot, and we'd be at the water table. So, we have an advantage to that up here. These guys hit a water main, and their trench is soon going to be full of water. And as you can tell, it isn't hard pan clay, and it's just going to be a muddy, soupy mess. So try to eliminate these conditions prior to this condition. Hazardous atmospheres. You may need to check for hazardous atmospheres in a trench, much like a confined space. I'll do a separate class on the 4-gas meter because I think it's necessary and it's important. But a 4-gas meter, our 4-gas meter will test lower explosive limit, so that's when something could flash over. It'll alarm at 20% of the lower explosive limit, so before anything can even flash over, it'll tell you it can be to the point of flash over. So think of it as a carburetor, too lean to burn, too rich to burn. There's a happy medium right in there. That LEL is what blows up. This thing will tell you when it's 20%. So you have 80% to get to that place where it's going to blow up. It'll tell you oxygen deficiency, oxygen enrichment at altitude. Our normal oxygen, they say at sea levels 20%. Here's like 19.5. Oxygen deficiency is anything less from 19.5 to 20, and oxygen enrichment's 21.5. So it'll tell you before you get in that situation. It'll tell you if you're in that situation. It'll also measure for hydrogen sulfide gas, and it'll also measure for carbon monoxide. So the 4-gas meter will tell you a lot about what's going on in the trench or in the confined space. Confined space definitely, because things can be trapped in there. A trench is open to the atmosphere, so unless something's heavier than air, it's going to escape the trench. And again, this is the lower explosive limit. It'll alarm at 20% of the LEL. It'll tell you long before it gets to a flashover. Again, just think of too lean to burn, too rich to burn. And that happy medium in between the too lean and the too rich is where something burns, and that's the explosive. Lower explosive limit is too lean, upper explosive limit is too rich to burn. Oxygen, normal oxygen, we have 19.5% oxygen approximately at our elevation. Oxygen enrichment is at a 21.5. Oxygen deficiency is at less than 19.5. Oxygen is basically 20% oxygen and 80% nitrogen. Carbon monoxide It's a simple asphyxiant. It bonds to the hemoglobin where your oxygen would bond to. The carbon monoxide bonds to that site, so it basically starves your body, your muscles, your brain, your tissues, everything for oxygen, because the carbon monoxide is taking up those oxygen bonding sites and your body can't process the carbon monoxide. So it just keeps building up and glomming onto those hemoglobin molecules until you just asphyxiate. That's how carbon monoxide works. The alarm will alarm before carbon monoxide builds up to a point where it could hurt you. See? And this is something where if you suspect carbon monoxide, look, with carbon monoxide, you got to have fire. If you have fire in your house, you could potentially have carbon monoxide. That's why it's critical to have a carbon monoxide detector. Check those batteries while you're home alone. Not alone while you're home. Anything that burns will make carbon monoxide. So if you got a hot water heater, furnace, boiler, whatever you have in your house, that could possibly be a source of carbon monoxide. So, get carbon monoxide detectors. And if you're detecting carbon monoxide with your carbon monoxide detectors, then take the meter with the sniffer on it and truly identify. Because that's what, better yet, how about calling the gas company and he'll come and do the same thing with his 4-gas meter that we could do with ours. But, just protect yourself. I'm just saying that you could probably, in an emergency situation, use it at home as equally likely as you would use it at work. We want you to be safe at home, where you're at right now. Get off that chair, Justin! Hydrogen sulfide gas, product of anaerobic degradation. That just means that bugs are eating stuff in a non-oxygen atmosphere, like under the water table, or in a non-oxygen atmosphere, and it's basically, Clayton can probably school us on this, but it's sulfur-reducing bacteria that basically eat sulfur and stuff and poop out hydrogen sulfide, basically. You can smell it at low concentrations, high concentrations, and kill you. Just be aware, we do have H2S meters specifically on the vehicles. They should be, check them out. Once they go bad, they'll go bad. Red light will come on, we'll order new ones. The 4-gas meter will also do H2S. Creatures, will it bite? Are there creatures in that trench? That makes it a hazardous trench. Snakes, always snakes. Alligators, never a good scene. But what's worse is having this guy on site in a dress is even, but at least he's got his safety vest on. Sorry, they duct taped his head, his mouth shut. Sorry. Okay, so cave-in potential. You always got to account for cave-in potentials. Workers can become buried. Like, look at those guys. I mean, is that trench over 4 feet or under 4 feet? I'd be saying, man, that's a close one. So it may not even be a trench, but that's how you could be exposed. What facts? 1 cubic yard of soil weighs as much as that truck. 2,200 pounds. Every time you exhale, it just crushes you a little bit more. Most trenching recoveries are fatalities. That's why you should always try to certify yourself for self-rescue. Self-rescue yourself safely. Then you don't have to rely on emergency responders, possibly putting them in danger. It's going to be hours before they get there. Stay out of the hazard before you get into the hazard. Means of ingress and egress, that means getting in the trench, getting out of the trench. If you got a trench, you got to have a means of ingress and egress, i.e. a ladder, a functional ladder, every 25 feet. That person has to have a ladder every 25 feet, anywhere in the trench. So if you've got a 100-foot trench, got to have a few ladders. Guy in the middle is at 50 feet, you got to have like 4 ladders in a 100-foot trench. Okay. We see that this trench is all in sand. See how far back they got that spread out so nothing's going to fall in. They also got a trench box in there. This is like the safest trench you could possibly get around. The most dangerous part of that trench is using that crappy ladder to get in and out and walking like basically upright on a ladder as you fall off into the trench. Sorry. Exposures. You may have exposure to falling loads. The soil should be stockpiled 2 feet away from the edge of the trench at all times. You may have exposure to vehicular traffic. If you do, you need to have the appropriate signs, workmen ahead. You need to have your proper visible gear. With that being said, a lot of cooperatives are going the way of just having FR high-vis clothing that substitutes as vests, so you never have to ever have a vest again, and that is a kind of bonus. But you're always wearing something bright. There's just some dude. He's out there. That trench is just as wide as the ditch witch that hogged it out. So that's not even a trench. He's just doing his job, getting down the road. No trenching and shoring required. That's it. Stay out of the regulation. The more exposure you have, the more protection is necessary. You need to do some tests on soil types. Type A soil, as I said, is basically hard pan, clay, or solid rock. Type Bs have a little bit more sand in them, and type Cs are basically a soupy sand, a sand that you really got to spread it out. There's ways to determine soil. A competent person must determine soil. This first one is a penetrometer test, and a penetrometer test tests the tension, the solidity of the soil, and it gives you a reading in pounds per square inch, pounds per square foot, and then that will relate to the density, the compacture of the soil. And here's a video on that. So you see him sticking it in, and then he takes it, pulls it out, it goes in as far as it's going to go in, and then where that little ring is tells you what the pounds per square foot is. Here's a video. So he's taking the penetrometer, he's going to stick it in the soil, it's going to have resistance, till it meets an impact point at a certain point, and then he reads it off, and that will tell him what the cohesive strength of that soil is. That's a penetrometer, and we can definitely get a penetrometer. We're going to go through some that are easier. This is a shear vane, and it determines the shear strength of cohesive soils, and this is another indication of how you determine the shear strength of cohesive soils. So what we're going to see here is he's going to stick that thing in there. It's got some little veins in it. He's going to crank it up on the calibrated little spring he's got there, and then it's going to give a readout when it fails, and that's going to be in pounds per square inch or whatever reading it's in, and then that applies directly to a certain type of soil. So a clay soil is going to be much higher than a sandy soil, just intuitively. A hard pan clay versus your kid's play sand. So then he's got the reading, and that's a shear vein. The next way is going to be the easiest way that I would say that you should classify a soil. You just grab a representative sample of the soil, a bunch of it from, you can do it in a bucket, you can just do it, throw some on the ground, but get it from different levels, from different lengths along the trench, and then make it into a ball, and stick your thumb into it. And this next video will basically give you the whole thumb penetration test. This is approved by ANSI, and it would be something that would definitely be good. We'll have the guy maybe talk. Maybe you can hear.
Conducted. Thumb is pressed firmly into the soil. If the sample fails to the edge, as shown here, the test results are not valid. This test makes an indentation into the soil only with...
Okay, my apologies. We are having problems, but what I'm going to do is... right here.
In the U.S., more than 800 construction workers...
We will go over the ANSI test at a later time, thumb penetration. But basically, going back to this right here, you make it into a ball, so you have the soil in a ball. And then a type A soil, you're trying to stick in your thumb, and these soils can be indented by the thumb, but it takes great effort. Type B soil, your thumb's going to go almost all the way to the end of your thumbnail, and then a type C, you're going to go well past your thumbnail. And these are approved ANSI tests, and at a minimum, we should probably try to do that. So you want to look at stress soil. We see a hard pan clay. It's got fissured soil. That means, expansive, compressive soils. Expands with water, compresses without water, and that could indicate that it's going